It gives me great pleasure to be here today as we consider a pressing challenge: how to navigate the rising tides of uncertainty that define our age. Before I begin, I want to offer my heartfelt thanks to two individuals whose leadership has shaped both the purpose and the spirit of this international gathering. To President Halimah Yacob, whose vision brought the International Conference on Cohesive Societies into being. This conference is her brainchild, and it is a privilege for us all to continue the endeavor she set in motion, with gratitude for the foresight that continues to guide us. And to President Tharman Shanmugaratnam for his insightful address yesterday, and I was very touched by his gracious words about my own work. And today, I hope to reinforce and build on the important themes he so clearly articulated as we begin to chart the complexities of uncertainty. This uncertainty is not merely a temporary squall. Uncertainty is the condition under which we now sail, and this storm is likely to be with us for some time to come. The 2022 United Nations Human Development Report describes our current predicament as an uncertainty complex, a confluence of destabilizing global pressures, sweeping social transformations, and deepening political polarization. We are being tested not by a single crisis, but an overwhelming, sometimes frightening interplay of conditions, whipping up into a perfect storm. New chapters in the narrative of global fragmentation are added by the week, day, sometimes it seems by the hour. The COVID-19 pandemic lent us a new norm of closed borders and social distancing, and a me-first mindset among countries, communities, and individuals. We have seen war return to Europe and West Asia. Food and energy systems are fragile, vulnerable to both geopolitics and climate change. Climate extremes have intensified with record heat, flooding, wildfires, and loss of biodiversity. And trust in governments, media, experts, politicians, and perhaps most sadly, each other has eroded alarmingly. Meanwhile, technologies we barely understood 5 short years ago, at the start of that same pandemic, are reshaping how we live, work, relate, play, and govern. Perhaps, most extraordinarily, all of this innovation in digital connectivity is unfolding against a backdrop of growing alienation, polarization, and loneliness. So let me introduce 3 complex interlocking factors that have fueled uncertainty and challenged social cohesion. First, the digital transformation of our society. Second, the dynamics of human migration. And third, the uneven economic impacts of globalization. Let's start with what I would call the paradox of digital societies. We live in the most connected era in human history. Over 5 billion people now have access to the internet. Digital platforms shape public discourse and private thought. The impact on our economies, our politics, and even on our minds is transformative. The pandemic was a watershed moment in our living history, not least in how it accelerated our virtual connectedness. It brought wide-ranging digital communities into our very living rooms. We conducted schooling, office work, legal trials, and endless group quizzes on screens. The potential for simpler, more streamlined communication exploded into public consciousness. Our expanding virtual worlds promised increased inclusion and accessibility, and a tangible sense of a shared global experience like never before. And it was a very human experience. Social cohesion was reshaped by a dynamic online global community, one held together by innovations both marvelous and challenging. Digitalization has brought knowledge to our fingertips and given rise to new forms of solidarity and community. Online, people are exploring identity in freer, more fluid ways. Digital society also has fantastic scope to amplify the voice of marginalized communities. Take, for instance, movements such as Black Lives Matter or Me Too, which have brought systemic issues of abuse and inequality to the forefront of international discussion and rallied people across race, gender, and borders. People can connect with others all over the planet, forming communities not limited by geography or ethnicity, but united by shared values and causes. We are fostering a kind of global empathy, a sense of collective responsibility. We can see this in globally coordinated environmental protection campaigns and anti-war protests. The cohesive potential of this digital society is truly exciting. Yet, we are also entering a digital disruption age. The multiple benefits from this relentless digitalization of our lives, unfortunately, come at considerable cost. Our digital spaces, which should be so good at opening doors and minds, are instead responsible for closing them. The very technologies that promise inclusion can entrench exclusion. Our information ecosystems have become battlegrounds. Algorithms have the unfortunate habit of trapping us in digital echo chambers, feeding prejudice and starving nuance. This results in fragmentation, a kind of online tribalism, if you will. Information, while accessible, is becoming decentralized. Online hate rises, as does the spread of conspiracy theories, the propagation of extremist ideologies, and even violence. And with truth itself now up for grabs, with the rise of fake news, trust in institutions and in each other breaks down. The very real dangers of this were realized last summer in the United Kingdom, in the race riots that followed the tragic murders in Southport. The fabric of our social cohesion is being unraveled in the digital realm. And so, it is there also that we must focus our efforts to weave it back together. Let me now turn to international migration. Migration is one of the oldest human responses to uncertainty. People move in search of safety, opportunity, and dignity. They always have, but never in such numbers. According to the United Nations, as of last year, the global number of international migrants had almost doubled compared with 1990, from 154 million to 304 million. It could hit 1 billion by 2050. Climate change, conflict, and economic and political stability are forcing masses of people to move, often faster than host countries can adapt. These forces are rewriting the geography of human life. They challenge not only our infrastructure, but also our compassion. Sudden demographic changes can trigger backlash, especially in communities who are unused to diversity. Extremist voices love to claim that multiculturalism has failed. Minority communities are made to feel unwelcome, even threatened, because of their religious customs or the color of their skin. And this in turn fosters insularity in those communities, an unwillingness or inability to integrate, an us versus them mentality on both sides. Isolated events are turned into sweeping generalizations, feeding fears about so-called culture dilution. And because multiculturalism is so often tangled up with immigration, it ends up being framed as a threat to national identity. And of course, no one ever quite agrees on what this national identity actually is. But that is a discussion for another conference. The challenge is worsened if people feel institutions are not on their side. Minorities may feel unheard, majorities overlooked. Populists often put across unsubstantiated stereotypes of minorities and migrants, presenting a false and negative picture of them as benefit seekers and criminals. They are certainly not reporting their important positive contributions to the economy and the citizens' well-being. We've all seen violence or crime being wrongly blamed on whole communities, the flames of prejudice being fanned by the press. And social media, with its penchant for misinformation, populist clamor, and partisan biases, magnifies tensions and undermines social cohesion in nations with diverse or migrant populations. And as global crises continue to escalate, so too will migration. So, what can we do as a global community? We must work together to find homes for those who have lost theirs. Try to alleviate the strain on countries that are overwhelmed. We must be welcoming to those we can accommodate. And we must strive to tackle the root causes that drive people from their homes in the first place. Meanwhile, at national level, governments must work harder to foster inclusion and integration, and to build harmony and understanding between diverse communities. It is a challenge that governments cannot afford to ignore. The consequences of a fractured society are severe. In my home country of Malaysia, we are all too acutely aware of the way in which a lack of social cohesion lowers resilience, which is why we have placed racial harmony at the center of our Rukun Negara, our Declaration of National Principles. These words affirm that Malaysia, and I quote, nurtures the ambitions of achieving a more perfect unity among the whole of her society, creating a just society where the prosperity of the country can be enjoyed together, unquote. We have striven to celebrate the diversity of race, religion, and culture that is so integral to our country. I firmly believe that that is one of our most precious assets, making us stronger, happier, and more prosperous as a nation. And of course, it makes us better at navigating uncertain times. Later this morning, we will hear about this year's Southeast Asian Social Cohesion Radar. The findings of the last survey conducted in 2022 show that the majority felt there was a strong social cohesion in the region, with Singapore and Malaysia near the top of the list. We should take pride from this strength, evidence even in the context of the pandemic, as tension and mistrust increased across the globe. Here in ASEAN, we have worked hard to sow the seeds of social cohesion, and that work is bearing some fruit. It stands out that of all the factors that pointed to social cohesion in that 2022 radar study, the most significant were grouped under the heading social relations. This describes participants' ability to trust in other people, the strength of their social networks, their perception of the acceptance of diversity. Interpersonal trust was found to be more important for cohesion than trust in institutions, social rules, civic participation, and even in the perception of fairness. Social cohesion is built from the ground up, on a foundation of humanity, and we must not take it for granted, nor stop striving for improvement. It starts small, with everyday interactions, the friendly word, the favor offered, the meal shared. What then is the core foundation to foster this trust? I believe a core foundation of social cohesion is simply to be a good neighbor. And it seems highly fitting that we reflect on that ideal for a moment. As a Malaysian, I am proud to call Singapore my neighbor, and I value the close bond that we share. Yet, elsewhere in the world, at this very moment, countries are turning on their neighbors. The very worst of the international violence we have witnessed in recent years, and even today, have been perpetrated across borders. The backlash against multiculturalism in many countries means that some communities no longer feel welcome in their own hometowns. Far from being friends or allies, neighbors have become enemies. Of course, behind every movement of people is a wider movement of capital, labor, and power. And so we turn to the third key dynamic, globalization. Since World War II, and especially since the 1980s onwards, trade liberalization, that is, removing barriers to trade, has been a crucial driver of development progress and of bringing nations closer together. The push for open markets and international rules help shift the world away from isolation and toward cooperation. And more recently, the rise of digital communication has supercharged global trade in services, connecting economies in ways we could not have imagined a few decades ago. Globalization has brought immense benefits: higher incomes, reduced poverty, and narrowed gaps between countries. But these benefits have not been evenly distributed. Within nations, it has been a different story, one of winners and losers. Some people, often those in struggling regions, in lower skilled jobs, have lost out, while others, especially the highly educated, and those working in thriving global cities, such as here in Singapore, London, or New York, reap the rewards. The rise of a small, multi-billionaire elite have led some to contend that today's rich are living through a new gilded age, exceeding even the excesses of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, with enormous riches and power heavily concentrated, especially in the top 1%. inequality has deepened further since the pandemic. Between 2020 and 2022, nearly 2/3 of all new wealth created globally went to the richest 1%, while nearly 2/3 while nearly the bottom half of the world's population, nearly 4 billion people, receive just 2%. Moreover, the extremes of inequality enable the ultra-rich to fund political influence through lobbying, political financing, and their control of traditional and social media. Such vast inequalities impede social mobility, intensify economic insecurity, weaken social cohesion, and eventually can ignite social conflict. So while globalization has brought unprecedented prosperity, there has been, as observed by the famous Oxford economist Sir Paul Collier, a contrary process, a widening patchwork of places and communities that have fallen behind. In some countries, the successful have even seemed to disregard left behind people, places, and communities, all subject to political neglect. This is another factor in the rise of nationalist politics and populist politicians. Where vast inequality exists, populist movements and protectionist politics soon follow, with both local and international consequences. Both international institutions and national governments have failed to adequately address deep spatial inequalities within countries. They have often been slow to set up mechanisms to compensate losers or put in place social protection systems to prevent or alleviate poverty. The upshot has been a pushback on globalization at national policy level, driven by the growing antipathy to it by those left behind. So what does it mean to navigate uncertainty wisely? Amid such upheaval, the pull of familiar certainties can feel deceptively comforting. There is a temptation to retreat into narrower circles of identity, to hoard privileges, and to romanticize a past that, if we are honest and strip away nostalgia, never was. But I am confident that the answer to uncertainty is not withdrawal. Navigating these uncharted waters demands resilience and reinvention. But most importantly, it will take collaboration and collective courage. I would like to offer 4 guiding principles. First, rebuild trust. We must reinvest in the social contract. We need transparent institutions, accountable leadership, and civic spaces where people feel seen and heard. Rebuilding trust means investing in media literacy, digital integrity, and honest communication, not just control. Second, prioritize equity. Social, economic, and ecological justice must be at the heart of policy. We must expand our understanding of equity to include not only disparities among people, but also the imbalances between people and planet. A just and resilient future means closing human gaps and healing our relationship with the planet. Third, embrace pluralism. I believe social cohesion does not demand uniformity. It requires the respectful accommodation of diverse culture, religion, identity, and origin, as well as of social and political perspectives. It is about recognizing human dignity and opportunity in accepting differences, reframing how we think about migration, and rejecting fear-based politics. Trust in our shared humanity is fundamental. Compassion and love for your neighbor is a value taught by every major religion and philosophy, as represented here in our conference. And in our connected world, it has never been easier to see people on the other side of the world as our neighbors too. Fourth, imagine boldly. Resilience is about more than survival. It is about vision. Education must equip people to think critically and act ethically. Cities must be designed for inclusion, and policy must be guided by moral imagination. Excellencies, distinguished guests, there is an old saying, smooth seas do not make skillful sailors. We are certainly not living in tranquil times. And as I said at the beginning, this uncertainty is not merely a temporary storm, but we are not adrift, and we are not without modern tools. Uncertainty, if met with clarity and courage, can become a valuable compass and a crucible for renewal. It can inspire us to build societies that are not just more secure, but more just. I have often wondered how best to approach leadership in times like these. And I have come to believe good leadership is not the art of prediction. It is the practice of moral clarity in the face of ambiguity. It is the strength to hold space for difference without surrendering to division. It is simply to captain the ship, to steady the course in uncertain seas, and to ensure no one is left behind. So let us not only navigate the unknown, Let us chart it. Let us map the conditions where uncertainty becomes not a threat, but a threshold. And may our work here ripple far beyond these walls, into communities, into institutions, and into the hands of generations who will steer the course next. Uncertainty is here to stay, but allow me to close with a popular saying of enduring wisdom, ambitiously attributed to Aristotle, and I am told also to Dolly Parton. You cannot change the wind, but you can adjust the sails. Thank you.